Hello, everybody. Welcome to the very first episode of Ashes to Art podcast. I am your host, Julie Kennedy, and I am so happy to be here with you. It is the first Monday of the first new year, not first new year, but you get it. It's a Monday, fresh start, new podcast, and you just gained a new friend. I'm so happy to be here. Actually, I learned a new word this year. What is higher than happiness? In the Bible, it says it's called jubilant. Like, I'm not happy to be here. I am jubilant to be here, okay? I'm Juby. I wanted to start this podcast off by talking about my story with Jesus. Hello. I thought that would be a really good foundational episode topic. I got my notes. I'm ready to go. Although I don't know if you can hear it, but I think I have the flu or like a common cold. Normally, I feel like if it's like the flu or COVID, I'm bedridden and I can't move and I don't want to move, but I got my strength. There's kind of been, when you start something along the lines in the ministry, whether it's a podcast or a book or something, I just feel like there's going to be trial and tribulation and you just got to fight through it, okay? So I'm fighting through this sickness. Nothing a little LaCroix can't fix for this throat. Well, it's nice to meet you guys. I don't want to make this awkward. I feel like one of those movies where the guy is looking in the mirror and they're like combing their hair, thinking of ways to say hi to the girl. Hi. Hey, what's up? And you hate all of them. So I hope I don't hate how I started this. Okay, anyway, I think we should pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for this brand new podcast. Thank you for giving me the courage to step up to the mic and share the good news of your word. And it's taken quite a few trials and tribulations to get here, but I'm so happy that I'm here. And I'm so happy that we have listeners, whether it's just two, my mom and grandma. And God bless the other viewers who are going to take the time out of their day to join us today. And you are the center of all of these conversations, and you are the center of this podcast. Thank you for this new opportunity to talk about you and your news with new people. And this is your story that you gave me, and I am honored to share it, Lord, to the best of my ability. It's not a perfect story. Oh boy. Cries right off the bat. It's not a perfect story, Lord, but I'm not going to hide it because you are part of this story and that's all that matters. So thank you for bringing us all together today in this new year. In Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen. Okay, my goodness. I just love God. Tears of joy. Tears of jubilance. Do you guys want to say hi to Miley? She said no, but we're gonna do it anyway. Hi everybody. I'm gonna go now. No, that's Miley, my emotional support recovery puppet. She's been here since I got out of treatment, and she's kind of just like, she's not an idol, by the way. If she were to burn in a fire, I wouldn't be sad. I just feel like I wanted something like that inner voice to hold me accountable and say like words of affirmation to. And it's just like a delicate, playful, youthful thing for me. Okay, my inner child loves her. So it just brings me down from that cool adult Julie and brings me back to like my inner Ubi. Ubi is my childhood name. Let's look at her. There she is. I do it for her. Oops, you can't see. She's right here. That's my inner child. I look at her every day and I do everything I do for God and for her. And Miley is just, it's not that I'm like talking to myself and I'm crazy. It's just, as a great counselor in my life said, she's just a little security blanket, and there's nothing wrong with that. All right, let's get into it. So I have two major stories in my life. The first one being my story with Jesus, and the second one being my recovery story. And I was gonna mush them together into one, but that would take forever. I just really wanted to focus on Jesus and where he stands in my life and my ups and downs with him. And am I really trying to cry right now? My story with Jesus means the world to me. It is my foundation as who I am as a person in this world. Like, that is my foundation. And I can break, I could bend, I could crumble, and I could turn into just nothing but ash heaps. But at that foundation, it's always going to be Jesus. It's always going to be the strength to keep me going and to keep my head above water and to keep me from drowning. So this is a very important story to me. My story began as a child. I know I've heard stories where people discovered Jesus later on in life, whether like as adults or things like that. And my story, I met God very, very young. Technically, I was baptized. My mom got baptized with me in her belly. And this whole time, my mom thought that meant that I was baptized too, since I was in her stomach. But isn't that so nice, knowing that I was in such a powerful spiritual setting, even in the womb? So that's one thing that I really cherish, is my mom's baptism story, knowing that I was in there with her. And it didn't count, by the way. We learned that when I turned 15 and I eventually had to get baptized. Yeah, so that's my womb story. So technically I knew Jesus even in the womb. But I also grew up in children's church since I was a baby, since I was a toddler, all the way until I have memory of being in children's church. So I remember Veggie Tales, I remember Noah's Ark, Moses parting the sea, all of that. One of the first children's stories I remember was Moses. I was in the bathroom, just a young girl, like in that picture, and me and my mom were in the bathroom. She was sharing about how he parted it and everybody walked through, and I was just like, wow, that's so amazing. So it's a good story of like God's power and trusting God, and also like some bonding time with my mom at the same time. So that is like one of my core memories as a child, is that. And then my next major memory of God was prayer boards. I have one right here. That's I call it a vision board. Some people call them prayer boards. And I do believe in manifesting through Christ, not on my own. So I remember as a young girl, my grandma was like, what do you want? I'll print it out in my office and I'll bring it home and we will tape it to the fridge. And I said I wanted a pink moped, a pink scooter moped. So she printed it out, we hung it, and then underneath it was Psalm 37 verse 4. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. That is the very first scripture I have always had memorized, because my grandma said, just say that verse every single day and you will get it. As an adult, I'm realizing that doesn't mean you automatically get whatever you want whenever you want, but rather aligning yourself and trusting in him above all, and then he will give you the desires of your heart in a God's will kind of way, not like my own will type of way. I did watch The Secret about manifesting, and I've always felt convicted when I watch things like that. Like, I do believe in it, but to an extent. I do believe what you set your mind to and what you envision, the goals, what you write down, what you want. I do believe you can get whatever you want, but I do believe it has to be aligned with God. I keep that in mind as a Christian girly. And I just think I learned about this before The Secret even came out. The Secret came out in 2006. I was 6. Okay. There was no way I was watching and comprehending that so young. I watched that later on in life and I was like, no, Psalms 37. So you have to delight yourself in the Lord first. So yeah, that's my foundation, was literally asking God for our desires. But the aligning yourself part is what I'm glad I learned that so young. Outside of personal and spiritual manifesting, basically, I don't know what to call it. I also learned leadership and confidence at a young age. I was in a dance team and my mom coached it, and I had large friend groups, and my mom taught me all about inclusion and how to lead with humility, and she always had to keep me in check. Freddie Mercury in his movie Bohemian Rhapsody, when they were creating the song Bohemian Rhapsody, he was like, again, record it again, like making his band sing it over and over. And then one of them was trying to do like a high note, and he was like, higher, higher. And he's just like pushing them. Like that was me with my friends. I was kind of bossy and I loved to dance. So I had like my own little dance group in my basement. And I was like practicing until our feet hurt, and my mom would have to come down and be like, girl, your friends need a break. Like, you guys should have a snack and play. Like, come on now. But you know what I mean? My mom kept me in check. Always, this was always like foundational for me, was you can be confident, just don't be conceited. Don't let being in this dance group and like kind of center of attention vibes, don't let that get to your head and things like that. I also learned, I don't know, I feel like whenever I was writing my notes, I was realizing humility was coming up a lot because I was constantly being humbled. I feel like that's what my whole life's foundation is built on, is getting humbled. I was held back in school due to just tardiness, and I was in and out of different schools because we were moving a lot. So I was tardy a lot, and it just caused me to get held back. So my friend groups were always younger than me. I was always taller, I was always older, and it got challenging. Looking back at it, I was like, yeah, I just wasn't with my normal class the whole time in school. So already you can see I was already set up differently than other people. But when I was in school, I did get a lot of awards. I always came in either first or second, mainly second. Again, humility is always, God never really let me be first in too much stuff. He always humbled me. And then there was this time as I get older, towards 5th and 6th grade, I was separated from a different friend group. So I found a new friend group, and they were kind of on the naughty side. They were kind of the bad girls, and they were a bad influence on me. But I do need to hold myself accountable and understand that I did have a choice. I could have ran back to my old friends. I could have made it work. I chose to get influenced by different girls with different priorities, and it was to sneak out, and it was an emo phase also. I was wearing a tail. I don't know if I should share that part, but it's part of my story. Okay, I went through an emo phase in this time, and I was too cool for a dance group now. I just wanted to hang out with like boys and chase boys, and I was getting into trouble. I got into some fights at school. I was in and out of like timeout, which is like our detention. Not cool. I would say that this is like my villain era or my worldly era. And then in 8th and 7th grade were also funky because I had my biological father was out of prison, and he came back into my life and introduced me to addiction. And I'm going to save that for my recovery story. I got baptized when I was 15, and I will show this bad boy. When I was 15, I was living in a different place than where I'm currently at, a different place than my hometown. And my mom was in law school, and my stepdad. And I got baptized because that's when we realized me being baptized in my mom's stomach with her didn't count. So when I was 15, I even have it written in this Bible. This is my first Bible. It says, to Julie from mommy and daddy with 2 eyes, because I was so cool, on my 15th birthday. Best present ever. So this has been in my life since I was 15, and that is like my OG Bible. We all have an OG Bible. It's written in almost every page. Certain chapters are all like crinkly because they got wet from like my crying. Like I have so much into that Bible. And and I was baptized. And the pastor was like, meanwhile, I was the oldest one there because normally when you get baptized, you're really young. So there's nothing but like children there. And he was like, if you guys want to say anything, you can. Obviously, the kids were shy, but I was like, sure, I'll say something. Oh boy. And I grabbed that mic. This is my praise and worship mic. I praise and worship before I get on this bad boy. Anyway, I grabbed the mic and I was like, the best way to describe the life I'm trying to wash away and be restored from is I feel identical. Like my story is kind of like a Harley Quinn. I said that in front of a church of normal church people who probably didn't even know who Harley Quinn was. I think I said that. I think I was like, does anybody know Harley Quinn? And I think like one person knew. So I said I felt like Harley Quinn and I was destroying a lot of things in my life. And that was how my baptism went, okay? And at least I acknowledged that. I acknowledged that I was in the wrong. I was like turning into this bad girl, basically. And that's why I wanted to get baptized. And unfortunately, my addiction and my lukewarm era wasn't quite over because once I made it to high school, I think I attended high school for 1 week and then I dropped out. I was held back. I was held back again. My freshman year, I had to repeat it. And now I'm like, the class I got held back initially, now I'm held back from that. And I was with an even younger group. And I was thinking about it. I'm like, by the time I graduate, I'm going to be like 19. But looking back, I'm like, I wish I would have just stuck it out. Like, who cares if I was the oldest one? Again, humility. When I had to sit in class and my previous class that I was held back from were all like sophomores, it was just so embarrassing, you guys. I felt so embarrassed. I'm like, not this again. And I think I just struggled with that. In the moment, I struggled with that type of embarrassment and humility. I felt like I was behind again. And I could do it the first time, but having to do it a second time, I couldn't handle it. And I didn't want to go to school. I didn't want to face that reality. So I ended up dropping out. And things, I'm not going to lie, are a little foggy in my memory after that. I do know it wasn't anything healthy. I was still in my active addiction. Priorities still weren't straight. Getting in trouble with the law. That's just like my villain era. I got into trouble with other girls and I regret it. If I could say sorry to them, I would. I just don't have the courage to do that. So I guess this is my apology. If I've ever hurt you and you are watching this, I'm sorry. That version of me was hurting. That quote, hurting people hurt people, is true. I was not happy with myself. I carried a lot of shame, toxic shame, and I let it ooze out in places in my life and with my interactions and my relationships with people in my life. And I held that lighter and I set bridges up in flame for absolutely no reason. In the time, I probably thought I had a good reason. Well, they said this or they did this, but in the end, guys, I shouldn't have hurt you like that, and I'm sorry. You never know who's watching. Then this was, I want to say in 2018. Again, I was struggling and God gave me a dream. He gave me a rapture dream, and me and people that I was partying with at the time were in this truck and we were going up and down like these hills, like straight up and straight down. And it felt like a joyride and we were drinking. And then out of nowhere, we were looking outside of the window and a giant black rectangle appeared out of the sky. Like it opened up and you could see like space. And it was like this big black void and it went boom. And it had this weird echoey end of the world type of sound. And it just like thundered where like everybody on earth could hear it. And everybody was looking up and screaming. And we were on this road and no one was driving. It was just like we all started moving in the direction of this rectangle. And as we got closer and closer, I was screaming, "It's the rapture, it's the rapture." I'm so sorry, Lord. And I was screaming, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, God. I'm so sorry. And as we got closer to that rectangle, it dropped us into hell. And I went to hell. And it dropped us in like this lake of fire, molten lava thing. And it was like digital pixels of lava. Thank goodness. God didn't give me that dream in 4K. It was pixely, thank goodness. And I was squirming around and I was screaming. And the people I was drinking with, some of them were family members. And we were screaming, I'm so sorry, God. I'm like, and then I woke up. My whole body was sweating, like so much sweat. And it was a Sunday because I woke up and I'm like, I need to get a pen and paper. And I need to tell my grandma. And I found a pen and paper and I was sitting in the island and I was just like so scared. And my grandma was like, is everything okay? She came out in her pajama dress and she was like, are you okay? And I'm like, no, I just had a dream about the rapture. And she was kind of too tired to hear about it. I remember she was just like, like, oh, what now? And I was like, I went to hell and I was really scared. And she was like, just write it down and pray about it. I'll talk to you later. And then she ended up getting ready for church and she left. I don't know why I didn't go. And after that, I tried to get sober. I really did. I got a job. I tried to be sober and I struggled with it. I could go a few months sober and I would eventually relapse, and it was just really hard to stay committed to my sobriety back then. And then I ended up moving to California with my new boyfriend, my ex-boyfriend. That was all free will. That was not aligned with God's will for me at all. And what had happened as a consequence is I only had 2 suitcases, 50 pounds. That's as much as they could weigh on a plane. And as I was gone, apparently all of my clothes in my wardrobe at the time got thrown away. All of my shoe collection, like at the time I was very like a fashionista, materialistic. I couldn't control very much in my life, but I could control my outfit and I could control my makeup and how I appeared. And I'll always talk about this in recovery. Like my makeup and my outfits was my mask. And I could not leave the house without a nice outfit and my mask. And I'll get into that later in another episode. So, all of my stuff, I had like a peacoat collection. I had like color coordinated clothes, like just all kinds of clothes that I collected over the year. It was a really fabulous wardrobe. And I had like walls of heels. I think I had like 2 pairs of sneakers and like 100 heels. That was the type of girl I was. So much jewelry, just so much clothes. I had like 3 tall dressers, 2 closets. Like I had clothes and they all apparently got infested with mice and they all needed thrown out. I still question this story, but hey, it's in the past. It's over with. And what it taught me again was I think I was idolizing my clothes at the time, and God was stripping me away from the things that I clutched to help me hide basically my addiction and my internal struggles, and clothes being one of them. And I was just left with just my 2 suitcases of clothes that I had. So by the time I broke up with my boyfriend and I moved back home, I only had 2 suitcases to my name. So that was hard. Then when I came back from California and Vermont, I was also living in Vermont. I know it's a long story. I don't know if I'll ever get into it. I love my life with my current partner right now. I don't want to talk about stories with my exes. They don't matter anymore. So yeah, let's just skim over that part. But it was a chapter and this is part of my story. And there were incidences, just real quick. I did have God. I brought my Bible with me and I had God, but God didn't have me. And I was living out my free will. God never abandoned me. I always felt him present in my life, but I was also just doing me. I was very selfish. Next is in 2020, during COVID, I hit rock bottom. My addiction took over my life. I got into a very scary, dangerous situation, and I got in trouble with the law. And it was the hardest chapter of my life. I'll get into it in my recovery story. But for now, um, to summarize, I had an option. I had an option to do 2 weeks of detox or go find a new job and work. And I picked neither of them. And I picked God's path, God's idea. And I said, I want to go to treatment. And things fell into place and I went to treatment. And I was baptized by fire. First in 2015, when I was 15, I got baptized, literally in water. And then when I hit rock bottom, I got baptized by fire. And that is when God burns everything you ever were. Being baptized by fire is intense. Everything that all your addiction, for one, is gone. You're healed from addiction. And I suffered from major PTSD. I'll get into that in my recovery story. But it was really hard, you guys. It was really hard. But I found God again in the purest form. Now I want to show you my CEP book, my Christian Enhancement Program book. I documented my entire time in treatment. And this is an ancient artifact. And there's a lot of goodies in here. And one thing that I wanted to highlight was, as I said earlier, I had God in this whole story, you guys. I always had God. God was always there. I always believed in God. Every time I got into trouble, of course, there I was repenting. And I was so lukewarm. I thought I knew God. I didn't. And when I was looking through my CEP book, it says, the spirit-filled life is not so much about how much of him I have, rather how much of me does he have. And this is talking about surrendering your life to Jesus. And that's exactly what was going on in my active addiction, in my wild Harlequin adolescent days. Again, I also went in treatment in 2020. I was only 20. I went to treatment for alcohol and drug addiction before I was even legal to walk in a bar. Okay, I kind of sent it a little too hard, too early. And how could this happen? How could a Christian child of God also be this wild, sinful, in the world child of God at the same time? How can those coexist? And I was talking about this with my mom. I'm like, Mom, how did I know Jesus this whole time and I still turned out like that? For one, it's trauma, childhood trauma. There are things that happened in my childhood where I think I'll get into that in another episode. I'm just talking about my story with Jesus. But there were, poverty, domestic violence, and addiction at, part of my childhood, and having an absent parent. And when the parent was in my life, they weren't the greatest example. All of these mushed into one, with also experiencing being a party girl at such a young age, getting into trouble with other girls, having drama, things like that. And then I have another part that I wanted to read that I found in this. When talking about obedience, it made me think of the Joker. The Joker said, "Will you live for me?" And that's where I was at in my recovery. And things that I was realizing is, how much of me does God have, and will I live for him? Because I was choosing death. I was choosing this dangerous route of my own and just feeling stuck in my own pit. My own hands had the shovel and I was digging my own pit essentially to the grave. And if I would have kept at it, I could be missing. I could be, even worse. And that's essentially where that path, when I hit rock bottom, that's where I was headed. And I feel like when it comes to obedience and turning your life around and surrendering your will over to God's, you are choosing to live for him abundantly the way that God wants. And I lived by this for 1 year. And of course, you guys, again, I was humbled. I had 365 balloons and a custom banner. Happy 1 year sobriety, Julie, or something like that. And I was really happy, and I was even prideful about my recovery. I was like, there's no way I'm relapsing. Like, all of this training and all of this rehabilitation and therapy and having my own clinician and different pastors and all of this great experience of finding God again and being baptized by fire, you would think that I would be sober forever, but that's not it. I relapsed after celebrating 1 year sober, one year and 1 month. Within that 1 year though, I did have God, and then I graduated with my GED certificate. So I did end up going back to school, and I completed it. And glory be to God, I eventually relapsed because I found my partner. And part of the rule in recovery is you got to be single for 1 year and just do you. And I did. I went back to school. I completed, I passed, and I was enrolled into college. I met my current partner, and we were going on dates in my 1 year, but there wasn't anything else. There was no intercourse. Okay. So me and my partner, technically I've been together since 2020, but I was celibate, and I was just focused on my recovery. And as soon as I hit my 1 year, we got into a relationship, literally probably that same day. And he took me seriously, and we went through a toxic phase, really bad, really ugly, and I ended up relapsing because we got in a fight, and it was so dumb, and it humbled me. Again, there's a lot of humility in this story, and I relapsed, and I couldn't sober up for 10 months. I calculated, I looked back, and it wasn't like I was drinking and relapsing all those 10 months. It was just a toxic phase in our relationships. When we'd fight, I go relapse, and then we make up, blah, blah, blah. And finally, January 4th, 2022, I to now have been sober ever since. So I've been sober for 5 years, 4 years consecutively since 2022. And then we had a baby. Things were great. I have this little revelation with my garden. And there's this song called Graves to Gardens, and that's just what it made me feel. What it made me feel like is like I could be in the grave right now through addiction. Instead, I'm here, I'm alive, I'm living for God, and I'm gardening. And I have this beautiful garden. This is my she shed that we're in. And I do a lot of DIY home improvements. My partner and I live on a farm. I do lots of art. We go on family vacations, family gatherings. I started Julie's Cake Company, my little baking business, and I stayed consistent in school. And this spring, in 5 months, I will be graduated with my first bachelor's degree in leadership. And I'm so proud of myself. Glory be to God. And June 2025, so June, this last summer, I was on fire again. And I really wanted closure this summer on that rapture dream I had. I was in the spirit, and I was like, God, now that I think about it, because he was talking to me every single day. God was literally talking to me every day. We were and still are like this. I was like, can I please have closure on that rapture dream? Am I still going to hell? Because I want to go to hell. And that was that morning. That afternoon we went boating, and I wasn't even thinking about that dream. I forgot I had said that to God. And I was on the jet ski, and the sun was going down. It was a beautiful sunset, beautiful golden hour. The sky was pink and orange. It was beautiful, you guys. And it was reflecting off of the water. And me and my little cousins were behind me, and we were cruising around on the jet ski. And I was looking at this sunset. I'm like, I bet is this what it feels like to go to heaven? Because it was so heavenly. I was like, this is so beautiful. It's like I'm cruising into heaven. And then out of nowhere, God said to me, you are going to heaven. He said, you're going to heaven, you and your family. And that he was proud of me. And I got my closure on that dream. So beautiful. That's my favorite story. And We had a blast all summer, me, my family, and I was reading one psalm a day. And either September or October, I was like, I want to start a YouTube channel because I want to share my story, the one I just shared just now. And I was like, I feel like I have more to bring to my social media platforms is I don't just want to be a pretty face. I want to just praise Jesus and tell the good news about my recovery because people see my highs that I post on social media. Julie's life looks so fun. She's always doing this. And I always hear feedback. And people are like, your life looks so fun. And I'm just like, it's God, honey. Like, I wish you guys saw like the struggle I went through to get here. My life is literally a living testimony of what Jesus has done in my life. And I was thinking about starting a YouTube channel, and I was like, I could do vlogs and get in more long durated videos rather than a TikTok of my projects and what we do. And then God said, you're going to start a podcast. And I was like, no way. I don't even watch podcasts. Guys, I don't watch podcasts. And that's like my mom's thing. My mom's always talking about podcasts. And I've never had the desire. And I was like, are you sure? And one puzzle landed into the next puzzle. Next thing you know, this podcast was born, but it was planted by God. And I just feel like he's moving me. He's telling me what I'm doing. I've been here ever since. And I'm going to get more into the details of that. Like this podcast and the creation of it, it wasn't like God parted the sea and I just walked on by. Like, no, it came with some trials and tribulation. I will talk about it more in another episode. It's either going to be the one after this one or the one after that about my golden year in recovery because I'm celebrating 4 years sober and it's my golden birthday, January 4th, 4 years sober. And I'm so excited. So I'm going to have a whole episode about that. Next, I wanted to read to you guys. Again, I documented all of my days in treatment. And day 58, it was June 20th, 2020. Where were you June 20th, 2020? It says, God will make you, and he will send you, and he will prepare you. He will transform you. Say yes to Jesus. Allow God to make you better. Take the gospel to tell the story and pass on to others. And I read that and I was like, oh my gosh, like this podcast. I took a podcast class. I took several speaking classes. I was in the speech competition. I had my own speech coach. I'm done saying speech now. And I didn't win anything, but it was for the experience that I was going. And I just feel like I'm ready now to share this story. And I'm happy that I got to finally share it. And this pretty much summarizes me and God. I'm currently still reading one psalm a day. I'm on Psalm 125. So I'm almost done. And I've been reading it since June 1st. And then the devotional I'm reading is called Zip It. It's supposed to help with, like, again, your speech. It's supposed to help you talk when to zip it and when to talk. So that is current. Again, guys, what am I not in recovery for? I'm in recovery for addiction and recovery for being a lukewarm Christian. And I'm here to tell you that you can change it around if you let God in and fully surrender. And it is possible. We do recover. This is just my story with Jesus. And my next episode, I'll talk about my recovery story. I'm pretty sure that's going to have more tears because that's more of my ashes. This had some ashes, but this is honestly the art that God made out of it. And it's honestly a story of perseverance, a story of continuing even when things get challenging and choosing life. I have to love my story. And then, if I'm being honest, this is really hard for me to do. In the beginning, when I was talking about my story, like in treatment, we did this thing called a common ground. And that's where you share your life story. Like literally, I went in depth and it was really hard. And when I first started it, I actually sugarcoated it. And when I heard someone else share their life story, all of the grimy, the crazy side, I was like, I need to share my true, authentic story. And it was in a more private setting. This is more online. And I don't want to put anybody in my life that I currently love and forgave on blast. That's why this is going to be kind of challenging, because I don't want to just like expose anybody for already resolved things. And I'm not blaming it on them. I will always protect their names and just take accountability for the stuff on my end. And God moved mountains for me, and he got me out of a very dark, dangerous place, and I would not be alive if he wouldn't have saved me and rescued me. And I had to be willing. And yeah, this is basically my story. I'm gonna conclude it now, and I want to end my podcast with something from Miley. So get over here, Miley. All right, what do you have for us today? Our very first episode, Miley. What do you think? How did you think we did?
Well, here's the dilemma. What I would have said was, sometimes I try to drive the car, and Jesus is like, "Girl, scoot over. I got this."
So you're saying I said the longer version?
That's exactly what I'm saying. I'm very proud of you, and I am very proud of you. No story with God is ever going to be picture perfect. There's always going to be up and downs.
Thank you for that, Miley. And we love you. Now, let's say a prayer and say our goodbyes. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this very first episode. Thank you so much for the courage and wisdom that you gave me to share our relationship. The relationship that I was blessed with since I was just a little girl. This little girl loves you. And this little girl is so happy and honored to share our story that you gave me. It's not a perfect story. It's messy. It's up and down. I didn't listen, Lord, but you were still there. You never, ever left me nor forsaken me. You have always been there for me in all of my phases and all of my eras, my villain era to my cute, innocent era. And I'm so happy that I could share the news, the good news of your word and the power you have in my life and other people's life if we just surrender. And I just pray that who's ever on the other side of this, that you please bless them and you give them grace and peace over their stories and over the hardships that they're going through right now. In Jesus Christ's name, amen. Thank you guys so much. I love you. Bye.